welcome. Good morning, everyone. I think we'll go ahead and get started. You all set? Oh, wait. Oh, everyone got all quiet. And now I'll say, return to chat. We will come back to you in 5 minutes. Meet new people, make new friends. I've been advised not to.
But can't we start now?
Sure. Yeah, let's start now. We're coming back. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Rachel Jacobson. I'm one of the co-directors at the Alliance for Feminist Movements. We are a multi-stakeholder initiative that brings together governments, private philanthropy, women's funds, and civil society to bring more resources and support for feminist movements. And I'm excited to start my day with you all talking about financing for gender equality, especially women's rights organizations, and official development assistance. I know that when I talk with friends and family outside this sphere, I tend to get a lot of blank stares when I say, let's talk about gender equality and ODA, and maybe you all do too. I often get asked, well, why should governments fund women's movements at all? And when I get asked this, I like to respond in a couple different ways. So one answer is that the human rights of women, girls, and gender diverse people are violated constantly, and in many cases with impunity. And the groups that are best placed to call attention to these abuses, to educate women about their rights, and to seek redress are local women's rights organizations. Another answer is that without women's organizations, gender equality is unachievable. We recently did some research with Equal Measures 2030 that found when women's organizations are defunded and their civic space is constrained, that gender equality stagnates or declines. Development assistance or economic development alone will not bring about a more equal society. You need women's groups pushing and transforming those norms. And another answer that we are increasingly being asked to give is that more gender equal societies are more stable, less fragile, and more secure. Women's organizations are bulwarks against democratic backsliding. They're pioneers in locally led climate adaptation and the guarantors of more stable peace. But these critical roles that women's organizations play are threatened right now by the scale of the funding cuts that are partly aimed at gender equality, but have serious ramifications for gender equality no matter what. 11 donor countries have announced substantial cuts to official development assistance, or ODA. Together, these 11 countries account for 3/4 of all ODA. According to the OECD, we could be looking at a decline of $56 billion over the next 2 years, and even more in the years to come. At AFM, we estimated that when combined with philanthropic cuts, the cuts to gender equality and the women's rights sector would total, at a minimum, $2.83 billion per year starting in 2026. But as I said, women, girls, and gender diverse people are going to be impacted by all of the ODA cuts because when services like health and education contract, or when goods, including food, become scarcer, it's women and girls that absorb those costs for their community with their time and labor and bodies. So to help us think through this moment, both how we've gotten here and what we do next, we have 3 hugely impressive panelists. We have Beth, the Senior Fellow at the Feminist Foreign Policy Collaborative, Laura, the Deputy Director of Fondo de Mujeres del Sur and a board member of Prospera, the international network of women's funds, and Nicola, Advocacy Manager at Equipop. If you haven't already, please do check out their full bios on the FFP Collaborative's website. So Beth, we're going to you first. How a state invests its official development assistance is one element of a feminist foreign policy. Many analysts and activists have asked, do governments with feminist foreign policies put their money where their mouth is? You've looked at the numbers. What did you find?
Great. Thanks, Rachel. And thanks so much to the Alliance, to Sciences Po, to the to Feminist Foreign Policy Collaborative for pulling this event together. A special thanks to our colleague Jill, who has been instrumental in making sure this happens today. Development, diplomacy, and defense are often cited as three pillars of foreign policy. We know that there's much more to foreign policy than those three. There's trade policy, climate policy, borders, and other ways of immigration and more. And so today we're looking at development assistance, or ODA, official development assistance. And as Rachel was asking, when a country adopts a feminist foreign policy, do we see changes in how they spend, how they allocate their development assistance as one of these pillars of foreign policy? And the quick answer is yes. We have data up to 2023. And when we crunch those numbers, we do see that states that have feminist foreign policies or feminist development policies do spend a greater percentage of their assistance on gender equality as a primary objective. They allocate a greater percentage to women's rights organizations, as Rachel was highlighting the importance of that, and they do invest more in addressing violence against women. What they don't do is that they don't do more than the DAC average in terms of investing in sexual reproductive health and rights, which is an interesting question to perhaps explore some more, a little bit more. So what I'd like to do is highlight two other pieces of the report, and please go to the website for more information on the report, and then end with some questions of where we go next. I think that the data, as I've outlined, is interesting, but as I said, there are some caveats to it. It only goes up to 2 years ago, and so we'll have to look at that as one of the implications of the study. In terms of support to women's rights organizations, activists have consistently asked for more money, and they've asked for better money. Less restrictions, more core funding, more flexibility, so that they're not dependent on short-term project assistance. And it's interesting to see that a number of countries with feminist foreign policies have responded to that call. We see a number of countries with signature initiatives, and we're going to hear a little bit from Nicolas about France, but also Canada and the Netherlands, co-terminus with their feminist foreign policy, also made new investments in this area, and that's something significant. The other point that the report gets into is looking at what's coming now. As Rachel was saying, sort of 23 was good times, and so we called the report Momentum Under Threat, because certainly we're facing a huge cliff with development assistance. We're also facing a redefinition of development assistance in many ways, in addition to the shrinking budget. There's more focus on innovative finance, on involvement of the private sector. We're seeing growing concerns or emphasis on justifying development assistance in terms of national interests. And so this is something that we'll have to look at going forward. So where are we now in some of the questions that we need to look at? How do we ring fence and protect those investments in women's rights, even in a moment of cuts? Are there strategies we can encourage decision makers to adopt to protect those very fragile but really important investments? How do we continue to make the case, as Rachel did? What are the ways or why this is an important investment in this environment? And how do we balance off both this is good for other reasons, this is good for democracy, this is good for stability, this is good for peace, this is good for the economy, with the human rights imperative that's involved in supporting women's rights organizations. We need to keep both of these elements of justification and rationale in focus. And then finally, we're entering into many discussions of a post-ODA world, given the cuts, given the ongoing discussions. And as these discussions take place about what will this look like, there's a real imperative for states with a feminist foreign policy, both in the global north and the global south, to talk about the feminist implications of this restructuring. And I think that that could be a really interesting discussion moving forward of how do we, when we redefine development cooperation, and we look at South-South or circular cooperation, we look at non-monetary elements, we look at the links of ODA with the reform of the broader financial architecture, what do feminist foreign policy countries have to offer? What do feminist foreign policy scholars have to offer in this moment? So that's a challenge to everyone in the room as we move forward. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Beth. And really encourage folks to go to the website, check out the report. I had a great privilege of reading it in advance, and a lot there to think about. And as with all good conversations with Beth, my list of follow-up conversations to have with you is long. Laura, we're coming over to you. So women's and feminist funds provide direct resources to women's organizations throughout the world. To support your work, many women's funds receive funding from bilateral donors. How are you all negotiating the current context of declining aid budgets?
Thank you. Hello. It's okay? Yes. Okay, thank you very much. It's always so nice and good to hear you all, and thank you for the invitation. And I'm jumping in in the name of Prospera, which is the International Network of Women's and Feminist Funds. I'm part of one of those women's and feminist funds, and a board member of Prospera. Prospera brings together 49 feminist funds that for over 25 years have resourced organizations and activists in 172 countries, making roughly 7,000 grants per year. So women's and feminist funds, the mentioned scenario that Beth and Rachel has talked about, has a strong impact because a bilateral donor has been our second large source of funding, and this accounts for 1/3 of Prospera members' budgets. So the impact, it is huge, and because it is not only about funding cuts from bilateral governments, but also from other sources of funding, like the philanthropic ecosystem. So a recent survey of Prospera shows that 8 out of our 49 members have already been affected by these cuts, and altogether has confirmed losses for $65 million. So why this matter? Because feminist funds are a cornerstone of the gender equality funding ecosystem. The international organization AWID have found in its recent research called Where is the Money that feminist funds that are part of Prospera and others that are not part of Prospera were the primary source of support for 55% of feminist groups worldwide between 2021 and 2023. So the consequences are already visible. The fund that I work in, Fondo de Mujeres del Sur, FMS, is part of the Leading from the South consortium, which is a global South-led consortium of 4 women's funds that has been funded mainly, but not exclusively, by the Netherlands. And the Netherlands has been a major champion on funding feminist movements, but now they have changed their funding priorities. So a grantee survey led by Leading from the South shows that 63% of our grantees would see gender-based violence prevention severely affected without that funding. 9 in 10 would cut or end their programs, and 2 in 10 would shut down. So the scenario is sad, and yes, it will hit feminist movements, but we are responding. And how we are responding as a network? First of all, I think that it is very important to notice that it's not that there is no money. There is a lot of money out there, a lot of money, and it's about priority. So it's not that we are living an economic crisis of no money around the world. There is money. So one of the things that we are doing is expanding and diversifying resource mobilization strategies, reaching out to less traditional sources, such as high net worth individuals, which is wealthy people, and also trying to resource more money from climate, democracy, and health funders, which have not, which has not been really like major funders of gender equality, because gender equality has always been put in this path of like gender justice and just only gender justice, when feminist movement has historically worked through the intersections that on climate, on democracy, on health, and many others. So, and second, and most importantly, when a crisis comes, there is like two choices: try to save ourselves individually, like a kind of a Hunger Games thing, or collectively. And as feminists, we know that the solution always comes as a collective solution. So within Prospera Network, there are some very strong mechanisms. There are some new, and some are proven, has a really long proven track of success. And these mechanisms are really important because they are not only mechanisms that mobilize money, but also it is, and now more than ever, a necessary infrastructure for funders to get the money into the ground. Because now we have the funding cuts, but every time more and more we have a lot of restrictions in order to put the money into the ground, because of the political hostile environment and also many anti-NGOs laws. So these mechanisms that has been built over the years from feminist and women's funds are really close to the ground and know how to move the money there. So I will give you like very shortly 3 examples. One is the SOA mechanism. That is a mechanism that is for the whole network. That so with this mechanism, a donor can reach many countries and many women's funds through many women's funds, all part of Prospera or some part of Prospera memberships. And this is something that, this is a mechanism that is looking for new money and really working towards funding feminist movements. Another example is the First Response Fund. And this is a pool fund that moves flexible, rapid funding when conflict, disaster, or backlash hit to women-led groups who are often the first to respond in these scenarios, but the last to get resources. And lastly, the third example is the one that I have already, thank you, that I have already mentioned, the Leading from the South, that it has been for over 9 years. It has allocated money for more than 1,000 organizations, and it is a proven mechanism that works, and we have been working a lot to sharpen our vision, we have a new strategy, and launch new resource mobilization actions. So just to wrap up, and I am finishing now, I want to acknowledge 2 things. One, and this is important, some bilaterals are still holding the line, and now that we are in France, I just want to acknowledge this, because at FMS, the fund that I work with, we have just launched a new initiative that will support over 45 organizations in Argentina, Bolivia, Uruguay, and Brazil and Colombia, which the French money. And last thing that I want to acknowledge is that feminist movements are resilient and have always worked in scarcity. And I do not want to romanticize this, because the funding cuts will hit them severely, but it is also important to acknowledge that the funding strengthened the feminist movements, but does not define the power of it.
Thanks so much, Laura. I really appreciate your reminders that gender funding might be niche or siloed, but our movements aren't, right? Our movements are so expansive. And your very helpful reminder that even amidst all of these cuts, there's still a lot of money in the world, and that's helpful. All right, over to Nicolas. So talk to us about how France came to provide funding to feminist organizations around the world. What's the trend in 2025 as France is embarking on this Feminist Foreign Policy Ministerial?
Yeah, thank you. Good morning to all. So the acronym in French for the funding mechanism is FSOF. It stands for Support Fund to Feminist Organizations, and I think it's quite a good example of how a dialogue between civil society and government can actually lead somewhere. It's not a smooth process, but it can work. So it clearly started as recommendation from civil society going back decades. More funding to feminist organizations is needed. In France, it resonated the year of the G7 in 2019. We had a CSO group, the Women 7, and that Equipop actually co-led that year. So basically, before the G7, President Macron announced that France would create a support fund to feminist organizations. And then France started to prepare for the Generation Equality Forum, and nothing happened. In February 2020, there was a lunch at Élysée with high-level people like the director of UN Women and other people, and one of our young partners from a Guinean organization, Adja Idrissaba, was invited too. And at one point, she asked the president what was going on or not going on with the FSOF. He kind of looked surprised, turned to the French Development Agency person and said, "What's going on?" And 2 weeks after that, we received an email saying, "We invite you to the first meeting to brainstorm about the FSOF initiative." So maybe it's a bit too much of a storytelling there, but I really think that's the moment where it all came to life. So the FSOF was created. So it isn't a pooled fund per se. It's more of an addition of funding channels and projects. However, it's still significant French public funding for a feminist organization that just wasn't there before. The official figures mention 1,400 organizations reach in 75 countries for a total of 50 million euros per year. So that's quite something. Second thing, after the creation of the FSOF, is the implementation. So it was a big challenge because administrative rules are not designed at all for the flexibility needed by feminist organizations, but it was also an opportunity because it triggered a technical dialogue between institutions and CSOs, that is to say, CSOs receiving funding at the end of the line, and also intermediary organizations or funds like Equipop or FFPs. I see Fozia in the room. And then the third step, even though all of this is not perfectly chronological, third step was to defend the FSOF. And I think that civil society successfully put pressure on the renewal of the FSOF in 2023. Several ministers announced the renewal. And with the budget cuts in 2024, we did a lot of advocacy, and I'm going to skip the details, but we did advocacy tours to facilitate dialogue between civil servants in France, decision makers, and activists from mainly Africa. And I think it's fair to say that we kind of saved the FSOF from budget cuts for, I mean, at least twice or 3 times in the last 2 years. But now the official development assistance budget is getting so bad in France that we don't know. I mean, it's pretty sure that the cuts are going to happen. We need to keep on putting pressure. I think up to now it was about looking forward, building something for gender equality. Now it's more about not destroying progress and more broadly about defending solidarity and human rights. So the task is probably even harder, but at the same time the community of allies can expand. And so I think we need to apply the same recipe over and over. That is, say, put political pressure on high-level decision makers and nurturing relations with civil servants. And that's exactly what we're doing. And we're actually, I think the 4 of us come back from Madrid where a consortium called Walking the Talk, and I see Bruna in the room, Walking the Talk, which is a European consortium that was created two or 3 years ago, and that Equip is part of. We organized the Financing for Feminist Futures conference in Madrid with over 200 participants over 3 days, with like 40 parallel sessions. So feminist activists are doing their part of the job, and then we're kind of hoping that the FFP ministerial this afternoon and tomorrow, we're hoping that in that ministerial the states will do their job. And for the Walking the Talk thing, from the Madrid conference, we issued a set of recommendations, and I think Bruna has a few paper copies there. It was like printed last night or maybe this morning, so feel free to ask him. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nicola. I appreciate your storytelling. It's such a helpful reminder of what long-term work this is, and that constant dance between the pressure and action between civil society and government partners. So with that, we want to hear from you. We want to give you all the chance to ask some questions, have a dialogue. You'll see there are mics on either side of the room. We encourage folks to be brave early in the morning, come and ask some questions. We'll take a couple at a time. Yeah, Erin, are you able to go get to a mic? If not, I think there is a roving mic. I don't think I should throw it to you, Erin. You got it? Oh, Nicola's on it. Perfect. So go ahead, you can line up. We'll take a couple questions at a time. Hello.
Hi, morning everyone. I'm Erin Kenny. I'm the global coordinator for the United Nations Spotlight Initiative to End Violence Against Women and Girls. We are an initiative that seeks to make the UN a better place for feminists and for this work. So my question is, where does the UN fit into all of this, if at all? Should we just get out of the way? Or is there a space for the UN in this moment of UN reform for us to do something, to support, and what does that look like?
Thanks, Erin. Some other questions? Sasha, come on down.
Hi, Sasha with Women Engaged for a Common Future. Thank you very much for the great presentations. I think we're hearing on the one side that we have this reduction in funding for feminist organizations. Just now, however, the right-wing government has put a little bit of funding back for women's rights, but they've limited it to certain issues which they feel the far right can support. Women economic empowerment, for example. That's in the Netherlands. I'm from the Netherlands. Tiny bit. Nothing compared to what we used to have, of course, for women's rights. And we used to have very strong support also for SOHR, et cetera, et cetera. So how do you see this? Should we have, for women, for the Feminist Foreign Policy, a sort of a compromise, trying to get also the more conservative donors on board and then let go of some really important topics, yes or no? Should we be broad, should we be small? What would be the strategy there? Thank you.
Thanks, Sasha. Any other questions? Yeah, are you able to get to the mic? Perfect. We'll do one more and then we're going to hand it over to the panel.
Good morning, and thank you for the presentation. It was really interesting. I'm an exchange student, and as a young woman, I'm kind of worried about the situation right now. I come from Italy as well, so feminist spending is not one of the priorities at the moment, let's say that. And I was just wondering, because I'm very pessimistic and in general, and I just wanted to know if you could address more, since I see that now the situation in the world is not prioritizing spending on feminist foreign policy. If you could address what we can do with the current status quo of the world, and us as well as common citizens, if we can do something to help the situation. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Do you want to go to a mic? we've got someone at a mic too, and then we'll come to you in the red shirt. Yes, go ahead there.
Hi. First of all, I would like to thank the panel. My name is Allegra. I'm an engineer, and I'm also a master's student here. And you've mentioned the decline of feminist funds despite the presence of financial means. And I would like to bounce back on I would say, social science results from Esther Duflo. She's a Nobel Prize winner in economics. I imagine that you know her. But she found, so in a 2012 study, she found that when women are empowered, so they are in a position of power, like policymaking, they prioritize female-centric policies. This contrasts also with the empowerment, so the process of empowerment of women. They also found that people will vote for women in positions of power only if they are seen as good leaders. So there kind of needs to be a legacy there, and it's something that has been lacking historically, but people expect that there to be a past history to also empower women. Well, this is in contrast, of course, with a bias. If we look around this room, also, there isn't really a gender balance in the attendees. And I think it's in general, it's a social contrast. So my question is, what will you tell young female generation like us, that would like to be empowered for gender equality, but that is faced with the contrasting institutional and social view that does not allow us to have a legacy that then can make us legitimate for a position of power? Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think we've got one more question, and then I'm going to hand to the panel.
Hi, thank you so much. Bonjour. Sandra Melon from the Aile du Sahel. First of all, thank you to the organizers and the panelists. You're just awesome that you exist and that you're doing the work you're doing. Really, don't forget you encourage all of us to keep on going. So thank you very much. Just wondering if each of you could spend just a minute, a second, commenting further on who the main bilateral, so I mean traditional but non-traditional because of the shifting tides, who are the main today traditional bilateral governmental donors, if you will, who are investing for real and pushing for financing for our fields? Just a little bit more. Thanks.
Great. Thanks so much. All right. So we've got questions about the role of the UN. We've got questions about how do we address and work with, the palatable issues that folks want to address on gender equality. Lots of questions about our messages to younger generations, and then this question about who are the bilateral donors. Laura, Nicola, Beth, anyone feeling inspired to go first?
I'm not going to go first.
You're not going to go first?
And the panel is not going to go first.
Okay, well, I'll go first. Really good questions. Thank you for all of that. And I know there's another class in here at 10 o'clock, or we could do a whole seminar on it. I want to first talk about the question about pessimism. And I think Rachel has outlined a lot of reasons for pessimism. And we've heard about the aid cuts. And one of the things that struck me at the conference Nicolas was talking about 2 weeks ago in Madrid was that there was a real feeling that, yes, this is a challenging moment. It's a devastating moment in so many different ways, both generally for our planet in terms of militarization, climate, but also for women's movements around the world, given the rollback on rights and all the attacks. And at the same time, there was this real rallying and this sense of rising to the moment and the sense that now is the time we need to have a big tent. Now is the time we need to have new strategies. Now is the time we have to unite around particular battles and issues. And as Laura was saying, that we're up to the task, and this is something that we can do. That hope in this moment is compulsory, and it's something that we will need, and we need the collective solutions to take us forward. And we've seen some victories, as Nicola was saying. We have seen governments respond to pressure from civil society. So I do, there are times, yes, where I think it's really bleak, but I think there's also moments when we're seeing mobilization. And the report that the collaborative launched yesterday was called Behind the Headlines, because they were looking at feminist foreign policy writ large across the globe and saying the stories, the headlines are all really bleak, but there are also lots of victories. There is progress happening. And I think that's one of the things that is important for us to hang on to. And sorry, I'm going on a bit long, but I'll just talk in terms of the specific questions about which countries. And traditionally, we have seen countries like Sweden, like Canada, like the Netherlands, France being some of the leaders in gender equality assistance. But as I was saying, the data that we have that is reported by these governments to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the Development Assistance Committee, the OECD DAC, only goes to 2023. And given that they're now projecting overall cuts, so we're not sure whether these graphs are going to have these inflection points that show drop-offs in different areas. So the past is no longer a predictor of the future in terms of bilateral flows. And so I think one of the other things people are interested in doing are these discussions with some of the smaller ODA countries. Ireland, for example, is not huge in terms of overall development assistance, but they have announced interesting initiatives to support women's rights organizations. And so where are those newer donors? Australia has a new gender equality policy for their international assistance. It's not called a feminist policy, but it has a number of feminist elements. I see Joe in the audience from the International Women's Development Agency in Australia, and this policy was not what Australian civil society had hoped for. But given the global climate, it's a real triumph. And so are we seeing leadership from new countries stepping up in this moment as well? I'll leave some other.
I can go. Yes, many questions. I'm not sure if I am an expert to answer all of them. Thank you for the question about the UN, if there is still place in it. I think the UN has been, of course, really imperfect, and it hasn't. I think it hasn't reached to all the objectives that it was aimed to have when it was set. But at least for women's rights, it has been like really important with all these imperfections. We are this year turning 30 years of Beijing '95, and this was an incredible framework that feminists, and there are many other frameworks that came from the UN that feminists has used locally and at national levels in order to push the agendas and to push the national politics into laws and into real public policies. So although it is very important to acknowledge its imperfections and to criticize them, I think, of course, there is still room. In this world, we don't know what it's going to happen, but if I am asked, I wish the UN still holds together because of all this incredible advancement that we could make due to that. And there was some mention, sorry, I didn't understand completely the question, but about trying to bring conservative donors, if that's a question. I think it's a very relevant question. I think we have been discussing that a lot. I believe that we have to be prepared. I think this has been mentioned a lot in the Madrid conference. We have to be prepared to and willing to make really uncomfortable conversations with some donors that are not the traditionals or all the donors that we have been talking to for over last years. I think we as feminists needs to think that that maybe there is some narrative, but that we need to change in order to have some arguments, better arguments. I don't know if that's arguments in English. Yes, arguments. Because it's not only about gender equality, which is of course the main thing for me, but it's also, as it was mentioned, about economic growth of a country. There are many studies about how when gender equality is better, how countries grows economically. It has also been mentioned here that democracies are more stable when there is gender equality. So I think we have to sharpen our narrative in order to get to some donors. But given said that, we have to have this difficult conversation. We have to sharpen or change some narrative, but we cannot change our politics. So I think there are some red lines that we have to agree on when approaching to these conservative governments. About the bilateral donors, I don't have really the numbers, as you said, Beth, but I think the French government is supporting some very interesting initiatives. Also Denmark, Norway. I don't know if in the whole cake the piece is big for those donors, but I think they are making that effort just in order to complement what you have said, Beth. And to the young woman, sorry, I didn't understand completely the question. My English is not that good, but I'm not sure if this will answer. But I think that maybe my message for young women is that all the rights that we have now, the world now is showing us that we cannot take them for granted, and it's sad, but at the same time, it's good that we still have them, and and history has shown us that fighting for our rights, it's the way we gain our rights. So I think that the most important thing, as I mentioned, is to work collectively and to be involved in order for that to not to happen. So yeah.
Yeah, and Rachel, about being pessimistic, I think it's a debate that we have usually within organizations. Do we scare people so that they mobilize, or do we try to find positive incentives? And okay, it's a debate that we can have over and over. But I would say be pessimistic or be optimistic, but react now. And react against the reactionary. Maybe it's more act than react, but we have to do something now. And I'm going to go back to the French example with the French Development Agency, who has suffered attacks from the far right, both on budgets, both on their websites. 5 years ago, people like civil servants on development, they didn't care about gender equality at all. They didn't even know what it was for the vast majority of them. But now they have to understand, and I think they are getting there, that the attacks on gender equality are the same ones as on democracy. And if, for instance, the French Development Agency doesn't defend against those attacks, the French Development Agency doesn't exist anymore in 5 years, 10 years, I don't know, whatever. I mean, I'm hoping not, but that's what's going to happen. So the answer to that must be broad, and we must defend gender equality almost at all costs, and that's what the FFP ministerial is for. And I think, feminist organizations are the core of that for decades. They are the ones doing it. But we also need allies like ministers who, I guess if you talk to them, they don't really care about the issue, but they need to speak up. And I think the current French minister doesn't really care about the issue. I mean, he probably wouldn't be very pleased to hear that, but I wouldn't say it's in his top 5 priorities, but he needs to do the job. Because otherwise it's all gonna slip up. And a thing that I've been telling French MPs for quite a long time now. When they say, what does ODA has to do with my voters? I can't elect on that. I can be elected on that issue. And gender equality, it's far away. The abortion in the US, it's something that never happened in France, and we have constitutionalized abortion, so there's no risk. This is a huge mistake, and now MPs, you need to make it a political issue. The international dynamic is going to affect women's and LGBTQI rights in France if we don't answer. This is not a vaguely threat, that France is preserved from. You need to act now, and you need to get interested in international politics like that. And so actually, my colleague Lucy, right now or in a few hours at the National Assembly, is going to tell the MPs, preserve funding for feminist organization. I mean, it's a bit short, but you're preserving democracy. Do it now, and don't overthink. Do it. That's it.
Thanks so much, Nicolas. We do have time for like one or two more. Oh, great. People are ready. Go ahead, come up to the mic. I see someone in a blue shirt, and I'm going to call that color chartreuse. Come on up.
Thank you so much for coming so early and saying so much interesting things so early as well. I have kind of two questions, so I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry.
Thank you. One is first, can you comment on the potential funding power of the philanthropic sector? Do you believe in it? Do you think the private sector has a role to play? I think for me it's a big debate right now in the different classes I'm taking. I'm a master's student, by the way. So I would like you to comment on that. Can we still count on states, or should we sort of pull our funding efforts and ask it to the private sector? And can they actually serve our interests, given that social impact is never the reason of being, right? My second question is a bit more trivial. If, let's say, I were a student that is wondering what to do with her life, where do you think I could be, or we could be useful? Where should we look for jobs? Where can we work to be useful? And please tell me what to do with my life, because thank you in advance.
Both political and philosophical and existential. Yeah.
The personal is political, right?
There we go.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you all for speaking today. I really appreciated hearing about everything that you had to share. I'm Maddie. I'm a master's student here at Sciences Po, and I also run a feminist organization in Indonesia. And I was just wondering what you believe the role of grassroots organizations are in the current political climate, and sort of where we should be focusing our effort and concentrating our work, and sort of ensuring that we can continue to move forward. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, 1 minute for each of you all. Final thoughts, questions, life coaching.
I don't know about life coaching, but maybe the first question. I think that the philanthropic sector and the private sector, it's really important to unpack those and not assume that they're homogeneous, right? And I think that we're seeing much more interest in philanthropy. At the same time, in many places, it's under attack. But I think it's an incredibly important sector, and one of the strategies that women's funds, feminist funds, and feminist movements are looking to is how to encourage national philanthropy. How do we move away from a reliance on North American and European philanthropy? Because, as people have said, there's a lot of money. And even in a lot of countries, there's a lot of national money. So how do we talk to women? How do we talk to families about the importance of investing and supporting feminist movements in their national context? That's one area that people are turning to when they say, yes, ODA is shrinking. So how do we encourage new forms of feminist philanthropy? So that's a growth area for work too, right? How do we make philanthropy work for feminist causes? And I think the private sector is also, it's really important that we bring a nuanced understanding. I come from Canada, and when we think about international development in the private sector, we immediately go to mining, and people go, this is horrible, this is extractive, it's violent, it's damaging the environment, which is all very, very true. But that's not the entire private sector. There are companies that are trying to bring the profit motive with social interests together. We're seeing that a lot in the alternative energy sector, that these are not, they're not, the private sector people are not in that, are not the same as the mining company barons, right? So I think we also, there's opportunities there to talk about redefining corporate social responsibility to bring it more into in service of feminist goals. But those conversations are just starting, and it's important that we have them with integrity and with collective vision, as the other panelists have talked about. Sorry, that was more than a minute.
You did great. Laura and Nicola.
Do you want to try?
Well, I can go on the grassroots organization question. I think that grassroots organizations are the engine of feminist movements. Like, feminist movements are an ecosystem of different kind of groups and different kinds of organizations, and we need all of them. And I think real change and real transformation would not happen without grassroots organizations. And I say this because feminist and women's funds especially fund those kind of organizations, because they are the ones that are like leading change on the ground. They are the ones that, if there is a new law or if there is a new public policy, they make that law or public policy real into the ground. They also have an incredible role in I don't know, in culture changing the minds of in the ground. So changes do not happen like at this level. Changes happens because there is a big base of people asking or working towards change. So I think, and I think that most of the funding cuts, it's affecting bigger organizations, intermediate organizations, and also grassroots organizations, because Women's Funds has been able to channel resources to grassroots organizations, but also grassroots organizations are the one that has been for longer and historically underfunded and has been doing the work with or without funding, with other resources that are like autonomous resources or voluntary work, etc. So yes to grassroots organizations. And where you can be useful, I love that question. I don't know which is the answer, but I think that you will be useful in a place where you are respected, and in a place where your ideas and your heart it's respected in a way that that could be transformed into work, into real changes, if that's what you want. I think it's a very romantic answer, but I cannot tell you where to send your CV. But please, if you have that hunger of working with feminist movements, do it, and do it in a place that you feel your work is worth. Well,
You want a minute?
Okay, so I was going to say more or less the same thing, but so grassroots organizations are already doing the right thing, so it's more for donors to fund them more. Maybe one piece of advice would be try to build broader alliances within civil society as much as you can, cross sectors and etc. And yeah, where to work, I think for now, I think the job openings are not fantastic in our field, but I would say, first of all, you work anywhere you want to work at. And second, I think, it's cliche, but you can make a difference everywhere, because all the layers of society are are involved. So I would say it's not about where, it's about how, no matter where.
Great. Thank you so
I
much.
hope it's not the conclusion. Because
That was great. Thank you so much. I might have started on a note of pessimism. It is not my nature to end on that. I am a cheerleader from Texas. So a couple of things that give me optimism. First of all, to have you all came this morning to talk about gender equality and ODA, and that gives me hope, to be honest. It's been many years since I was a student, and I'm not sure I would have done it when I was one. It gives me optimism to have amazing colleagues like Jill, who made this happen, to have wonderful partners like the Feminist Foreign Policy Collaborative and the colleagues here on this panel. It gives me hope that we have folks like Erin fighting the good fight inside the UN to make that institution what we need it to be. And it gives me optimism and hope that we do have a legacy. And it is behind those headlines, and it is there, and it's our job to make that visible. And last, what gives me hope is this is the time for really big, bold, creative, and collective thinking, and that fills me with dread sometimes, but honestly, a sense of opportunity and hope that we can make this happen. Yeah? We can. All right. I've also been told that we can make this happen, but we have to make it happen out there. There are classes. Thank you all so much for coming.